Hello, my name is Jordan Huelskamp Foreman. I am the founder of Salon. I live in New York City.
I'm Emily Nam. We are art people.
What art you choose to collect says a lot about you. Same as what you wear says a lot about you, the homes, the way you curate your home. And, for me, being an art collector is really like an extension of myself and my values. So the works that I bring into my home, the artists that I have a connection to are artists that share some kind of fundamental challenge or value or like identity as myself. So the works in our home, I'm able to really create this relationship with them that changes every day. And like something that a lot of people talk about is like you could be looking at a work that you've had in your home every day for 10 years. And every day you can discover something new about it. And that definitely is the case for me. Like the art in my home just keeps on giving. And I'm very like anthropomorphic. I think that like plants and furniture and art like have these like little souls, these little like personalities, like little sparks of consciousness, to get really woo-woo about it. Like when an artist is making work, like I feel that some of their spirit and their consciousness is like imbued into that object.
Jordan Huelskamp Foreman is the founder of Salon, a community-oriented and member-managed contemporary art collection based in New York City and globally owned. The role and persona of the art collector has shifted and accessibility has widened. We discuss what choices are available to build a collection of art that offers space for expressive dialogue whilst being a discerning financial investment. Through shared ownership, commitments to a long-term acquisition is more accessible through a model forged by Salon. Through collaboration in decision-making, members contribute to building a future legacy, a timestamp of a culture, which for Salon is reflected in a co-owned portfolio of blue-chip contemporary art. Jordan's fluid perspectives of the art world and emerging technologies has allowed her to be a leading voice in contemporary art collecting. After graduating with a master's in journalism from Columbia University, Jordan found herself embedded in the art world, serving as Curatorial Lead at Artsy. Here, Jordan finely tuned her curatorial tastes, acumen, and art world savvy, which bolstered her creative vision and strategic planning for Salon's evolving success. We talk about Jordan's early interest in art and how these experiences have reverberated in current tastes and her decision-making process. In particular, the generation of land artists, including Nancy Holt's Sun Tunnels and the presence of Donald Judd in Marfa, Texas, and the urgency of John Chamberlin, mirrored in works by contemporary artists such as Kennedy Yanko. As an art collector herself, Jordan speaks about the relationship to an artwork which develops. The moments of connection to an artist's work, both imbued through the artist act, and how an audience can respond and engage with it over time. Particularly through living and being with art in our personal interior spaces, and the storytelling that is reflected. And we discuss the approaching and possibly unnerving conversation that is taking place around artificial intelligence and its role in art. Jordan shares her unanswered feelings towards rumours of a robot that paints. What impact do these shifts have on the artist and on the value of the maker? You will find Jordan deep within a rabbit hole or wandering through an art fair in New York City.
Jordan, hi. I'm excited to speak with you today. Thank you for being here with me.
Thank you, Emily. I'm super excited to be here too. I really appreciate you extending the invitation to be here.
No, of course. So you live in New York City. I was just wondering what galleries you've been to lately or what artworks you've seen.
Well, I live in Soho, which has in the last few years become sort of it has
hub.
returned to its roots as an arts district. As you probably know, the 70s, 80s artists sort of took over Soho, lived in these lofts, were producing incredible work. Donald Judd's former house and now his foundation is a stone's throw away from my house. And there's a ton of galleries who have popped up in the neighborhood. So I'm always walking by Jeffrey Deitch. I'm constantly going through Tribeca. I love Walker, White, Lispenard, all the emerging galleries in that block. It was just Art Week last week, so I've been really out and about. One of the things that stayed with me was Kennedy Yanko's show right now at Salon 94. I am a big fan of her work and the through lines to John Chamberlain's work. And at Salon 94, which is an incredible art and design gallery uptown, They actually they had a John Chamberlin upstairs, so you could see Kennedy's work across the first few stories of this incredible townhouse, and then you see a Chamberlin, and sort of to connect her work through art history was really amazing. So that was probably my favorite thing I've seen in the last few weeks.
That's nice. There's this John Chamberlain kind of vibe around you. Donald Judd, I love that house and doing the tour, and then there's that big John Chamberlain.
Yeah, I can't seem to shake these like minimalist male artists. I actually in college did a curatorial fellowship. I'm sorry, not a curatorial fellowship. It was a creative fellowship. And it was focused on land art in the American Southwest. So I looked at all this art that was being created ephemerally. A lot of it is still around today, but like Michael Heisier's work, I went to the Spiral Jetty. I went to Nancy Holt's Sun Tunnels. And then I also spent some time in Marfa, where I became well acquainted with Donald Judd's work. I saw they have an incredible warehouse out there that has hundreds of works by John Chamberlain, all of his car sculptures. So that was really like a key first experience for me with art. And it happened kind of in this really organic, accidental way. I was studying American history in college, but I was super interested in art. And that really was this like spark that hit me. And it's kind of funny to see today how the echoes of those artists are still with me.
Mm.
Yeah, and to commemorate actually my connection to Donald Judd and that like artistic awakening I had that summer when I did my fellowship a couple years ago, I found a print at auction by Judd that I have in my house. And every time I look at it, it reminds me of being a young, naive girl, just wanted to learn more about art and tumbling into that incredible experience I had in the Southwest.
Was that one of your first pieces that you purchased?
It was among the first pieces I purchased. The very first piece of real art I bought was, I think, the year I joined Artsy in 2018, and I had no money. So I went onto the Magnum photo sale, which is an incredible photo sale that happens once a year, maybe twice a year. Um, Really important photographers, and they sell works for $200. There's these small prints. And I bought a work called Twins by Tyler Mitchell. And this was before Tyler had his Vogue photo, Beyonce photo shoot, before he blew up. And I still have it. It's right above me, actually, on my desk. And I look at it every day. It's an incredible piece of art. That was my very first. And then the Judd was not long after that. I think the second piece I bought, I saved for a long time and bought a Petra Courtwright work. That was my first significant purchase. I love her work. I connected with her as a fellow California woman, and I really like how her work intersects and uses technology and also art. She creates these digital paintings through an intensive Photoshop process. So she finds source materials all over the internet, splices them up through Photoshop, and creates these incredible sort of visual collages. She calls them digital paintings. They look like paintings, but when you go really close, you can kind of see, wow, that's a print on aluminum. So it's a super cool, like interdisciplinary practice.
You were at Artsy as the curatorial lead, which is an online marketplace, which is funny because I never really think of it as an online marketplace, but it is. It's also a great resource for so much information, and you have all the editorial and but how did that, was that very early on that you sort of jumped into Artsy and found that trajectory into the art scene or the art world?
Yeah, I agree. Artsy is so many things. Artsy is very expansive, and its role in the art world today it should not be underestimated. Artsy has done some incredible things, bringing art to the forefront of cities. Artsy's done incredible public art installations with artists, digital art installations. Of course, the marketplace component, supporting galleries all over the world. Artsy had an auctions business. It's a super expansive business model, and it was so much fun to work there. I'm really lucky that I landed there. Artsy was my first job out of graduate school. So I started my early career experiences in the Silicon Valley working for tech companies. And sort of to give you a better sense for how I ended up out here, I'll take a brief detour and I'll kind of explain how and why I find myself in New York. And that really is a question of identity. I think that identity is very salient depending on where you are and your circumstances. So, a story I like to tell is when I was at Stanford as an undergraduate, I was among, I think, the 1% of the student body population who doesn't take a computer science program, because I was sort of trapped in these limiting beliefs about myself that, oh, I'm not so great at math. I'm a writer. I'm an artist. I'm a creative. I grew up dancing. I was very, very creative. So at Stanford, surrounded by a bunch of mathematical geniuses who were building apps, I totally shied away from that side of things. So I thought, wow, I'm out here, but I'm really a creative person. So launching out of my undergraduate, I thought, well, what are my skills? I guess I'm a great writer, so maybe I should go be a journalist. And I was really excited about that path, and I loved my experience in journalism school. But once I got out there and I realized here I am in New York City, the cradle of culture, I'm actually a huge nerd. So my identity totally shifted. And I realized, surrounded by these writers and these journalists and these artists, that I actually see the world totally through technology, through this lens, informed by innovation and disruption and my, experience coming out of the Silicon Valley. And so that's when it hit. Okay, I was really confused about who I am. I really need to marry these two parts of my being, who I am, my strengths. And so I wanted to make the most of my time at Columbia. So I followed my passions, as most people tell you to do. If you're not sure what to do, just follow what interests you. It's always been my guiding compass.
Of course.
And I took a bunch of arts related journalism courses while at Columbia. So writing about the arts course, an arts criticism course. And I really immersed myself in the art world here. I went to my first art fair. I was going around tons of commercial galleries, really discovering this side of the art world that I didn't really know before. I was born in San Francisco, but I grew up in Fresno, California, which is a more agricultural part of California. And my parents are super artistic and creative. They have a great eye, and they collected a lot of regional and local art, but they are not, collectors in big C collectors. So I was like, wow, this is an incredible industry. And I realized while at journalism school that to be a great journalist, you have to be a great observer. And while I'm a good observer, I'm also somebody who's very prone to jumping into the middle of the action. So I wanted to be there. I was more interested in working in it and what it meant than simply observing and writing. So that's when I sort of knew I wanted to pivot and move into the commercial art world. And at that same time, I met Carter Cleveland, who was Artsy's founder, socially. And so I started learning more and more about Artsy through him. Incredibly inspired by Carter. He played a huge role in my 20s and the way that my career developed. And I said, Carter, I want to come work for you. And he introduced me to a woman who was running our collector relations team at the time. And they had an opening and there was a good fit. And so I worked on that team. Then I helped start the curatorial team inside the company and eventually made my way up to the top of that team, leading our curatorial department. And that's the beauty of Artsy and startups in general. You sort of can define your own path and align your skills with your interests and see where you're most useful to the company. And that's how I was able to align my skills and strengths around curatorial, which at Artsy is not super traditional curation. It's a little bit more from a merchandising perspective. So we have all of these millions of works on the platform. How do we make sure that those works get into the hands of the right users? How do we make sure the right people see them? How do we match make? So it was really amazing marrying my interests in art and really getting my my MS, my PhD in contemporary art at Artsy, but also really working with our incredible product teams, engineers to try to help design those experiences. And yeah, it was amazing. And when the time was done, I knew I also wanted to sort of follow that entrepreneurial spirit that was so imbued at Artsy. And that's how I found myself deciding my next step would be to start my own company.
It's interesting that you've shared your hesitation with technology, because I think many people, and I myself, are going through this kind of accepting maybe a resistance, and then now going, well, it's here, it can function, and like breaching that barrier and trying to go, well, I'm a woman, yes, I'm interested in technology. It's like, well, yeah, we can embrace this and be part of this, and it's not something to be afraid of. So I'm really
Yeah.
glad that you shared that, because I just assumed you were a tech girl, Silicon Valley, came through like fully determined to
Well,
sort of
yeah,
be an
no,
emerging
I was
startup. And
as humanities as they come.
yeah, that's great.
Yeah. But I'm captivated by technology, and the big discussion, of course, in technology today is artificial intelligence.
Mm,
And
mm.
I mean, there is going to be some really profound unlocks, I think, that come from AI if we can figure out how to align ourselves with this technology. And I think it's going to become not only just AI is not only coming out of, the advances in the algorithms and the models from Silicon Valley. Pretty soon here, there's going to be a big political and geopolitical component. I think that pretty soon here, nations are going to step in and try to either nationalize or regulate these companies pretty heavily, because the technology can become so powerful that it can become dangerous. However, all that aside, I'm pretty optimistic. I'm generally a techno optimist. I believe in humanity. I think that we will figure out how to harness this technology and use it for good. All other technological advances in history usually, end out, net positive for humans, with some major exceptions. Thinking about military weapons and potentially social media. I think the conversation's changing around social media and its inherent harms. Um, but that said, if AI is used correctly, I think, and to center it back on art, something I've been talking to friends about recently, and I'd love to share here, is sort of this like idea about personalized art. So think about our streaming services. I'll make an analogy because I think it's easier to understand with like a Netflix analogy. You've probably heard about this coming age of personalized entertainment. Like, we'll be able to log onto Netflix, and using generative AI, they'll be able to spin up a television show or an interactive game design that's perfectly suited to who we are, our interests, and our mood at that time. That's something that
Wow.
the big entertainment world is talking about. So if that's true for entertainment, what could that mean for art? So I think if there are artists out there who are curious about using this technology and generative technology to create these art experiences, these incredibly immersive experiences, like, we're going to get some really boundary pushing art pretty soon. And hand in hand has to come like better hardware, because I don't know if you've been inside an Oculus Rift or been inside an AR. My husband and I bought an Oculus for like research. We wanted to see what it was all about. And to be totally honest, it's not there yet. I got super sick inside. I got super car sick. Like, I was feeling super nauseous. I had to come out of it immediately. But I think that technology will get better, and that'll facilitate this really interesting new sort of Pandora's box of, what else can we experience in these spaces from an artistic perspective. So that's something I'm excited and optimistic about when it comes to art and AI.
What's your relationship to, the artist and the maker, and the relationship where AI can maybe skip that step? I guess it's like anything where, taking away jobs and it's taking away the human voice. Is that important for you to maintain that integrity of the artist's work?
I mean, I think that it's,
Or they can exist together and they're just different
yeah,
dialogues
it's
that are
such a hard
happening?
question, and I probably would have a different answer depending on what day you ask me. But I think it just depends on, art is art, right? Art can be created by humans. I think art can be created by these programs. And it's probably more meaningful when it's coming from a human. But that's not to negate these experiences that these AI hallucinations are making. Some stuff can be quite profound. Um, so I'm pretty like agnostic about art. I think everything's art. I see myself as an artist. I live an artist's way. I live an artistic life. My home is art. My cooking is art. Everything I try to do, I try to approach in an artistic way. And I think AI is similar, but I don't know yet. I think that every day these models are changing and our relationship to them is changing. So I don't have a totally good answer for that.
Yeah, and I do think it's the relationship, and it's choosing how, like, we have a choice. How do you want to relate to it? And then
We have a
maintaining that
choice.
integrity and participating in a way that is aligned with you, and it may not be aligned with someone else, and someone else might be interested in. I saw this great a performance, and they had this amazing AI video at the background, and it was fantastic, and I loved it, and it really complemented the music performance. And so
Yeah, I
there is
think
space
AI.
for it, and there is a lot of support from it to like enhance things. And yeah, it will be an interesting dialogue of how art or the art community kind of lets it move through. Anyway,
I
to
think
be
that's something.
continued.
I agree. I agree. And to your point, you had this experience, you saw this AI video. AI is creating is lowering the costs to produce a lot of
Mm,
work
mm,
significantly. So the cost to produce like a documentary or a video or an animated short is was previously extremely high. So now as that cost comes down, I think we're going to see more artists who wouldn't have embraced that medium start to embrace these mediums. And hopefully it leads to a proliferation of art and artistic experiences everywhere we go. If the cost to bringing that into a space is lowered, maybe we'll have more art in more spaces.
yeah, it's very interesting. I'm trying to be less. I'm trying to be more open and just responsive.
Yeah. Something else that threw me for a loop recently, kind of on the same topic. I don't remember the name of the company. I think that they're still sort of building in stealth. But about 6 months ago, I chatted with somebody who reached out and they are engineering a robot that paints. And their business model is actually to have this robot paint and to sell the works. And that sat with me for a long time because I didn't know how I felt about that because that felt like very much displacing painters. And if you're going to buy a painting, I'd rather you buy a painting from a human artist. But I'm still thinking about it. That robot painter is still sort of has stayed with me. It has I put a little hook in my heart, and every once in a while I think about it.
That's the tech girl in you.
Yeah,
So let's talk about Salon. You founded Salon in 2022, and it's a member managed contemporary art collection
that's right.
that started at a time probably during COVID. Did you have this idea seeded a long time before 2022?
So the breadcrumbs were sort of there. The origin story of Salon started, if I think I had to pinpoint a moment, it actually started before the pandemic when a friend of mine who runs a gallery reached out to my husband and I. He's a dear friend, incredible eye. And he sent us a painting and he said, "Hey, somebody is selling this painting and I really want to buy it, but I don't have enough money. Would you guys want to go in and buy it together? And we can rotate it around our house." And I was like, wow, okay, this sounds really fun. Yeah, I want that painting too. And I can't make it work myself either, but if we come together and buy it together, we can make it work. But ultimately, it felt a little bit too risky to go in on a purchase together. My husband and I thought about it and we thought, if one of us wants to sell it before, what do we do? And we might be stretching ourselves a little too thin. Why don't we just buy a work that's more in our price range? But that was kind of the first experience where I thought, hmm, okay, that was interesting. If I had a container that would allow me to collect with somebody else, I love that. I'm a super community driven person. I'm like very community and sharing oriented. I go to Burning Man every year, and I'm always trying to think about like the systems we live in, and that it doesn't need to be that way. Like there are so many other systems we can set up for ourselves. And yes, we're constrained by society, we're constrained by capitalism, but are there other ways of working within it that allows us to kind of break free from this like traditional ownership mold? Mine is mine, yours is yours. So that was like the first moment. Then COVID happened. And I think I mentioned earlier, I was a ballet dancer. And
Oh, cool.
for
Yeah.
COVID for me was like all of the anxiety of the pandemic manifested in bodily injuries, like my dance career catching up with me. So I was like in pain all over. I had to have hip surgery and I was like totally bound to the house. So even when the world started opening back up, I was like still rehabbing my hip and I was just spending a lot of time at home. So between working from home and being in bed and like managing my hip injury, I had a lot of time to think. And that is also kind of where the space was created for me to be able to also think about Salon. Um, so that was also like a major factor of why I was able to start this company while working at Artsy. So, the silver lining, the blessing in disguise.
It's interesting, Artsy in this trajectory of collection-based thinking and attuning your own voice and building an understanding of art and a dialogue that you are having with it, just probably unconsciously. But
Yeah.
then you kind of just went, okay, here we are,
Yes.
Salon.
Yes.
How do
And
you apply all this information and knowledge that you've acquired?
100%. And at that time, the same time this is all happening, um, I was when I was at Artsy, I was always sort of like put onto special projects. It's like, oh, Jordan, it's COVID. We got to figure out how we're reaching people via video. Oh, Jordan, like, what's this NFT thing? Like, will you help us figure this out? Or like, what should our digital art strategy be? I was always kind of like tapping onto these, like, ooh, there's something weird happening in technology. Like, Jordan, can you help us figure it out? Which I loved. I loved like figuring out new initiatives. So I was really lucky to be able to work on that kind of thing at Artsy. And in my experience, really trying to pull apart the NFT craze and figure out what we could do from an artsy standpoint, working on some projects in that space. We ended up doing some really awesome stuff, but a conversation for another time. I learned about these really interesting communities called DAOs, DAO, Decentralized Autonomous Organizations. And specifically, I was incredibly inspired by um, this collective called Tribute Labs. It was started by a law professor here in New York, and it was this legal container around a decentralized autonomous organization, which at that time was a little bit murky. Crypto, if you remember in 2020, 2021 was sort of, there was no regulations yet. There was people doing some pretty wild things. The SEC was coming down hard. So it was kind of a legal gray area. But this incredible professor came in and said, okay, if we do it DAO and we wrap it in an LLC, then it's safe and we can do this. And so they created this series of really cool decentralized communities that were collecting digital assets. The foremost community they created was called Flamingo DAO, and they were collecting NFTs and digital art. So I was like, whoa, look at this community. You have 100 people anonymously online through this smart contract, pooling their funds and then deciding how they wanted to allocate those funds. And they're actually collecting and co-owning this art and these NFTs. I thought that was really rad. And because my expertise is in physical art, not digital art, I thought maybe there's a way to bring this to the physical art world. And that was where the idea for Salon was born. And to connect all the dots, I thought, hey, remember that time my friend Josh also kind of wanted to collect something together? And maybe this is that way we do it. And so, the long story short is that I did tons of research. And Salon's first iteration, we took what we loved from the decentralized autonomous organization framework and got rid of what we didn't. So we didn't tokenize, we didn't totally build on the blockchain. We were doing some fun stuff on the blockchain, like voting on the blockchain, logging in through blockchain wallets. And that allowed us to really like learn about this new technology while also staying very much like in the physical world. We're an LLC. It's Salon is structured pretty much like a traditional fund. And that allowed us to start collecting art together. So, the mission of Salon really is to transform the experience of collecting from something that's a solitary pursuit into something that's collaborative, community-centric, and strategic, and can borrow from multiple perspectives to make decisions that are better informed than the decisions that we could make on our own. That's really the curatorial thesis, that coming together, we can really leverage all of our ideas, the artists that we discover, and then our collective networks of access. So, our relationships with galleries, and that will allow us to create this incredible collection together and make a collection that's better than what we'd be able to assemble on our own. And, 3 years later, here we are. We have 9 mega amazing blue chip museum quality, like monumental works, which was not something that I expected. I thought we would buy much smaller, more emerging works, but our community said, let's swing big, let's buy these huge pieces. And our members are almost running out of wall space because the key differentiator to Salon as well is that we install the works in the homes of our members. I don't believe art should be in storage. I think it needs to be living and breathing, and we need to have relationships with it. We need to be good patrons. We need to show it to our friends when they come into our homes. So that was really important when I was building Salon, to ensure that we could all experience the work that we co-own together.
I think it's such a fantastic idea. There's a few things that you kind of break through. I feel there's this intimidation of being an art collector. And it can also be very hard for someone to step into that space. And I've been thinking a lot about teamwork and what that means. And it really is about bringing in a better quality, a better dialogue, having better conversations and learning from each other to build something that's quite beautiful, which, you have a beautiful website as well. So it's a very
Oh,
transparent collection, which I
yes.
really, transparency is all through what you're doing and making accessibility to art a big part of it. And that, I think, is really important.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that. Yeah, our members are all collectors on their own. So when they join Salon, it's super beautiful. These are people who already engage in art, but they want to have another layer to their collecting experience. They want access to this community. And what's been really beautiful is like watching the way that our community has really organically become friends and become a resource for one another. So, we have this group chat and we're all in it. And during art weeks, it's so fun because people will often like qualify the decisions that they're thinking about making personally with the Salon group. Say, hey, I've discovered this artist. Like, what do you guys think? Like, do you think this is priced right? Like, um, should I buy this? And it's so cool to be able to have this like network of people to discuss these major purchases with. Um, and I think for me, like knowing that we're building this sort of nebulous and like transcendent collection. When I like close my eyes and I think about all the works in Salon, I kind of see this like map of the world, and I like see little pins where all the works are, and it brings me immense joy and comfort to think of all of our works like vibing in the homes of these really cool people who have come together to do this together. Um, and I'm really proud of what we've built. And now my job is to really quarterback Salon into the future because we have really big aspirations. We started with this smaller cohort of people who really believed in the idea. The people who joined Salon right away, like our angels, and they're like sort of like radicals. They're radical art collectors because they said, okay, I'm going to put my blind trust in this community. We're going to buy some awesome stuff together. I know it. Like, let's do it. Here's my money. And then boom, like we did it together. We defined how we want to buy. We defined our curatorial thesis. We found, the artists that we felt most strongly about that we wanted to collect right away. And now, we want to grow. So we're sourcing new members. We're bringing new people in. We want this collection to get much, much larger. And I think a lot about like what an institutional collection could be. I think we think institutional collection and we think museums, public collections, we think works that are in these like, sites that we go make pilgrimages to see the works. But I think like as we move into the 21st, 22nd centuries, it's going to look a little bit different. And, to harken back to the point I made earlier on AR, VR, we're going to have way more experiences in the digital realm pretty soon. So if we have experiences in the digital realm and we don't need to go physically to a museum to see works, like, can we have an institutional collection that actually does exist in this decentralized fashion? And so, this is a far flung idea, but someday I really do hope to build out some kind of digital space so that everybody can come in and see the works, learn about our artists, and really experience Salon's works in that third space. So that's a big dream too, and I hope we continue to grow. And the ultimate mission is that we do have this institutional heritage collection that can stand up alongside these big American institutions that we know and love today.
Well, you mentioned legacy a lot on the website and just in how you write about Salon. And what I think is really interesting is this idea of the collector. They can come in, buy, flip, make money. It's really about investment. And so what I appreciate is your art fund is based, yes, as a financial investment, but there's also this attention to a cultural archive and creating something that is also a legacy, and it's an information portal for what was happening at that time, who were the people that contributed to it. Not that that's accessible, but it doesn't feel so heavy on making money.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate you saying that.
Or
And
there is an additional aspect of creating a beautiful collection that is also inherent.
yeah, 100%. I mean, art and commerce are very intertwined, and these are big purchases. So I think a lot of collectors, but personally, I mean, I'll speak for myself. I buy a lot of art, and art under a certain price threshold, I don't have any expectations for it. It's something that I'm buying purely for the love and the enjoyment, and it'll be in my home for the rest of my life, and I'm connecting with the artist, and it's not an investment piece. But for the pieces, and everybody has a different threshold, but the pieces that I'm spending a significant amount of money on, I in order to justify making that purchase, I want to have this comfort that it will hold its value, or grow with inflation, or even appreciate in value. And that's something that not a lot of people in the art world are super. Most people are reticent to talk about that. But these are huge purchases. So we we're being financially responsible when we diversify our portfolios with art. And so that is a component of Salon, and we do hope that our collection appreciates, grows in value, and that when people need to exit Salon, they exit at a position that's higher than when they came in. Certainly is a goal, but also, like, we're not locking these works away in storage like a traditional fund would. We're living with them, and we're trying our best to really preserve, exactly as you say, how this collection came to be. So one of the ways that our platform, we have an online platform where we vote together on the decisions that we're making. Um, the platform basically archives all the information you'd need to know about our collection at that time. So, and we upload it to this really cool thing called the Interplanetary Filing System, which is a decentralized, sort of like a Google Drive Dropbox of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
So my goal is that that's acts as this preservation system. So one day, in 100 years, in 200 years, an archivist or curator, somebody can go in and say, like, how did this come to be? How did this crazy kooky group of collectors like really assemble this collection? Who voted in what way? Was this collective able to actually predict the ways that our market could go? Were they right? Were they wrong? How? So I think, like, from like an archival data perspective, it's like super interesting. And the other thing about Salon is that it's designed as a permanent vehicle. So a traditional fund, art fund would say, come in, we're going to buy these 3 works, and in 10 years we're going to sell them, and you're going to get your dividend. But Salon is open-ended. So you come in, the art stays. When you want to exit, you exit by swapping your shares with an incoming person or selling your shares to an existing member. So we'll never be in a position where we need to, like, offload works when somebody wants to exit the fund. So there was this, like, really careful container we created to ensure that our art was really, really protected, and that we'd never have this unintentional circumstance where we'd be forced to sell the works.
I wanted to ask you about that. I think part of being within a group, that risk taking and assurance that, it's not going to lose value, and hopefully it does increase in value, doing it as a community and making decisions together feels more robust. And particularly for those that are new to collecting and bigger purchases, like making those really, $100,000 painting, it can be more accessible to more people. The other question I had was, how do you manage that legality or security of making those purchases and containing all of this, and then also giving the artworks away to people and just letting it float around? Like, that feels very trusting.
It is. Salon has a lot of trust, but the law is a beautiful thing. So Salon has an operating agreement that governs all of this stuff. It protects everybody. Everybody has limited liability. We have an LLC wrapper. So that's all fine and good. And then the art, we have an insurance policy. So you bring up a really good point. Um, all of the works in our collection are insured under a centralized insurance policy. So when we collect a work, basically the way it works is that the order you join Salon is the order you're eligible to host a work. With one caveat that your investment in Salon has to be worth the same or more than the value of the work you're bringing home. And that's in worst case scenario. If something happens, if you decide to go rogue with one of our paintings, we can pull your shares.
Mhm.
And so that's just one level of protection. So once we decide where the work is going, we add that person's home to our insurance schedule. We get that all checked out. We ensure it's covered during transit. And then once it's installed, it's protected. And we actually have a really competitive insurance rate because when you think about it, most collectors are buying an insurance rate on their collection that's existing in maybe one or two homes. So if you have a leak or a fire in a home, all your works are at risk. But actually, since our works are distributed across many different homes, if there's a emergency, we might have only one work at stake. So that allows us to keep insurance costs super low. And then our artwork hosts actually reimburse the fund for insurance, which helps keep operating costs really low for everybody, and ensures that we have more money to reinvest in art purchases.
Do you rotate the artworks? Like, is it with someone for 5 years and then it moves around?
It's a good question. We decided that once a work is installed, it's installed for good. However, if somebody ever moved, they didn't have space for it, we'd totally swap it out. And if a member ever came to me and said, "Hey, we want to swap, like, can we do that?" We'd totally do it. It's pretty like we're pretty like open and casual the way that we would handle that. But we would just vote on it as a community to make sure that that wouldn't violate any our hosting policy as it stands today. Or maybe we'd add to our hosting policy and pass that as a community.
One of my frustrations is when you want to go, particularly with a museum and their collections, and they've got this work of art, but it's never on view. And
Yeah,
I think some, like maybe MoMA is rotating their collections a little more now. But what I like that you're doing is putting it out in for people to experience and not just locking it away because, well, I don't believe that's what art is for.
I agree.
I feel that there's many people that can benefit from art and they don't have to be the owner of it. And so, yeah, even if friends and family are coming over and
I agree. I know there's some crazy statistics, like only 1% of like the Met's collection is like on view at any time. And I just think about the warehouses in Queens that have all these antiquities. And, God, I'd love to go through those archives. If anybody listening has a connect, please take me.
I think they also have the vaults under the West Side Highway. That's what I've heard.
I need to research that. That's really cool.
I know someone that went down. I think you can contact and ask to go and view something, and
I will.
friends
I
of
might
friends.
have a plug for this. I know who to call.
But it is, I think, and I think more about it now because not everyone can own one work of art, and particularly in museums, I notice they're so full, and there's so many people looking at art, and people really rejoice in experiencing art. And I think extending that to a wider community and creating space for that to be available is really important, in particularly right now when art is not really getting the best support that it could be getting in accessibility, education, funding.
Yeah. On that point, Salon, for legal reasons, when we built, my early hope and desire for Salon was like very utopic, and I was like, I want anybody to be able to invest in this. They could invest in $1 into this. They can invest $100 into this. They can invest $100,000 into this. I want to be able to do that. But when I went down the process of researching how we would do this, what the legal container could look like, there are some legal ramifications. So in our case, in order to be an open-ended fund, only accredited investors can join. So that was sort of like that was a factor for me at that time, and that dictated how I chose to build Salon, which was then higher priced works, higher entry points, higher tickets coming in. But one day, if the law changes, you better believe I will be the first person to spin up this like new radical crazy thing where we can have this gigantic collection and like a bunch of people can invest in it. And there's even maybe a possibility, like if the law would allow in the future, that Salon as a collective could decide, okay, 10% of the value of our 10% of our shares, let's like allocate towards this special investment vehicle, and anybody can from or all around the world can invest at any price. And I'd love to be able to do that. And in that case, like more and more people could actually have a stake in Salon and could vote. And the way that our voting works is your voting power is tied to your shares. So people who invest the most have the most weight in our voting system. So people could come in at a small ticket and have a little bit of voting power. But I'd love that. Like the more people who could have their toes in Salon, the better in my view. So I revisit this legally with our like team of accountants and lawyers once a year to see where the precedents are. But someday we might be able to do that.
I think there's a joy in owning art, and maybe you can just talk a little bit about what you think an art collector is in 2025 and how that's changed, or how people maybe are being more transparent about their art collection as a part of their expression.
Yeah, I love the trend of more transparency in collectors. Like there's an incredible website. I'm going to forget the name of it right now. Is it collectors.com potentially? And they allow you to upload your entire collection and show other people, and it's sort of like a social platform. Artsy also has kind of a fledgling component called My Collection, where you can upload your works into My Collection, and on the go you can like pull it up and show people. And someday I hope on Artsy's roadmap they decide to flip that on publicly so people can see the works in each other's collections. There's a huge market opportunity in that too, like unlocking peer-to-peer sales. It's really, really interesting. But yes, and then Salon is also incredibly transparent. Like we want everybody to be able to see our works. We built out a beautiful online viewing room. And I hope we have more of that. I think that art speaks a lot. What art you choose to collect says a lot about you. Same as what you wear says a lot about you. The way you curate your home. And for me, being an art collector is really like an extension of myself and my values. So the works that I bring into my home, the artists that I have a connection to, are artists that share some kind of fundamental challenge or value or like identity as myself. So the works in our home, I'm able to really create this relationship with them that changes every day. And like something that a lot of people talk about is like you could be looking at a work that you've had in your home every day for 10 years, and every day you can discover something new about it. And that definitely is the case for me. Like the art in my home just keeps on giving, and the longer it's with me, like the crazier the idea is that I'll ever be able to give it up. Like they're a part of me and a part of my life, and I'm very like anthropomorphic. I think that like plants and furniture and art like have these like little souls, these little like personalities, like little sparks of consciousness. To get really woo-woo about it, like when an artist is making work, like I feel that some of their spirit and their consciousness is like imbued into that object. Yeah. So like the energy, you can feel it. And I love going into people's homes and seeing how they curate their work. It could be art from a blue chip gallery or like a weird antiquity that you found at like a vintage pawn shop somewhere on your travels. It doesn't matter. Everything is still art. And the way that they speak together, they speak to one another when they're together, like creates this beautiful tapestry of life and values. So I love that about collecting.
I wanted to ask you about the process for making decisions for the Salon collection, and because you do have a range of people with different tastes and intentions. And so how do you choose those acquisitions? And then also I wanted to ask you, is there a set kind of guideline of how the collection is going to look, or just as you were talking about, and I've thought about this, like how each artwork informs the next, and so you're actually building something without being aware of how it will evolve?
Yeah. So when we first launched, the intent was we don't have a curatorial thesis yet, but with this first cohort of members, we're going to draft it together, and we're going to do that. So we spent the first few months of Salon with our first cohort of members, like really hashing this stuff out. We'd get on Zoom calls, we talk about our visions for the collection, what we wanted it to be, what kind of artists we wanted to prioritize. And the big tension that emerged was like these objective criteria and these subjective criteria, and how should we be voting? So we decided through our curatorial thesis that we drafted as a community, we would have this like set of 10 objective criteria that we are looking for in artists. And like a few of those things off the top of my head are, and there's no score that an artist needs to like get, but we just use this as a framework. So we can say like this artist satisfies like these points in our curatorial thesis, now we can hash it out. But those criteria are, have they shown with with an emerging gallery that we love? Have they been collected by a regional or national institution or museum collection? Are they in the collections of any notable private collectors? Have they been included in a recognized biennale or some kind of curator-led, exhibition that holds some cultural weight? What are or do they have a secondary market, or are they super emerging? So we look at all those things and we decide, okay, if that artist satisfies all of those, our objective criteria is like, we feel pretty good about this artist from an investment perspective and from a growth perspective. We really want to identify artists as they're on their big upswing. We want to create this collection that has resonance that will be able to, in 10, 20 years time, look back and say, yeah, we as a community really helped predict which artists would become canonical in today's culture. And then the subjective stuff, that's where our voting comes in. So, do we like abstraction? Do we like figuration? Like, do we want to have balanced mediums? Like, these are all things that we hash out and use our voting power to decide. So it's been really interesting to see sort of like the collective aesthetic taste of Salon. We love these like very ambient, moody, abstract, conceptual, really like rigorous use of materials. It's a very like intellectual and academic collection. And we've done a pretty good job balancing mediums, but we have an interest right now in continuing to expand. Like, we bought our first sculpture and our first ceramic, but mostly we have paintings. And we also recently, our last work, we bought our first woven textile work, an incredible diptych by Igshon Adams we bought from an amazing emerging gallery called Blank Projects in South Africa. So we continue to diversify from a medium perspective. And that's like the whole fun of it. Like, I love when we get onto our regular members meetings, like just hearing about the art that people are interested in and learning about new artists and where and how people connected with their stories.
Also, the different perspectives of having different people bring in their ideas. In any creative practice, you can get stuck in like this tunnel vision of, this is what I like, but maybe I'm not aware I like this also, but I haven't got the space or, incoming to have it introduced to me. And so that's really nice to have that dialogue amongst, peers or collectors or.
That's right. And everybody discovers art in their own way. Some people work with advisors, some people go to shows and fairs in their city and have a really regional focus with their collecting. Some people scour the internet and discover new and emerging artists on Instagram. So we've got all sorts of like flavor of collectors, and we can all come together and see where these ideas come from. But we've had a pretty distributed network of members pitch artists, and once an artist is pitched and there's like a critical mass and there's like a lot of people who like that artist, then I'm typically the one who's going out and sourcing work. We buy all of our works primary. So far, that's what we've done, because we want to have relationships with galleries, and the primary market is like our best way of supporting the artist, because they get 50% of the sale in most cases. We wouldn't be opposed to buying something at auction. We just haven't done that yet. And, through my years working in the art world, I have tons of relationships across gallery networks. And if there's ever an artist that's from a gallery that I've never spoken with before, usually there's somebody in Salon who says, "Oh, I'm good friends with this sales director. I'm happy to call him." So it's been really cool to see how to use a very financial term, like how the deal flow has worked.
Do you view the artwork in physical form, or do you purchase off digital as well?
Mix of both. We haven't bought anything that at least some of us haven't seen in person before. Not necessarily the exact work, but at least a work by that artist. So, like, for example, we have this incredible Alicia Quade sculpture called Little Beehide. It's one of her sort of like iconic series, but there's a mirror and there's two objects between it. They're mirror images of each other. It plays with perception. So I had seen like a lot of sculptures from this series at various art fairs over the years. And I'd just seen a show at OMR that Alicia had a couple of years ago. And Salon decided we wanted a beehive sculpture. So we were able to get one from Gallery 303, and it was shipping from Germany. So nobody got to see it in person, but because we'd seen so many before, we felt really confident about it. So that's like a good example. Um, and then a lot of other big pieces we will go to see in person, and we'll set up like a viewing and we'll take along some Salon members who can go. And that's been exciting. And the one that comes to mind, actually, we bought an incredible Yoko Matsumoto abstract painting from White Cube in a summer show last year. And it was like the marquee work in the show. You like walk upstairs and it was like whoosh on the back wall and this beautiful cadmium green. And as soon as we all saw it, we were like, we need this. And so I think, whenever it's possible for us to view the works in person, we do. But I'm quite comfortable buying sight unseen. I mean, through my years at Artsy, I saw just how many people do that. And when you get comfortable with, buying art, and you have relationships with sales directors who can FaceTime you with the art, who can walk you through, and you can see all, 3 dimensions of the works. I'm quite comfortable. Maybe that's because I'm like a zillennial and it doesn't scare me. Some people totally scares to buy a work sight unseen.
Yeah, I also think it's experience, and I think a point you make is seeing a lot of the artist's work at other shows or fairs and just getting a feel for the work, because that speaks a lot for material quality,
Yeah.
integrity,
This
and
is
just that you talk about it, the artist putting in their soul to the painting, for example, you can feel that, and that can't be felt through a digital
absolutely,
platform.
absolutely. It's like I always laugh. My husband is so funny about the sides of artworks. And he, if there's like a painting or some kind of work that has an exposed edge, he really wants the edge to be treated as an artwork. And he doesn't love when painters just sort of like abandon their stroke after, if it bleeds off the side of the canvas, it's done. And you see like white space or whatever. So his like funny, finicky thing is like, he always wants to see the sides of the canvas. So, that's, that's
So
his
please take a
special.
photo. Please send us a
Yeah.
photo of the
Yeah.
edge.
So we will FaceTime and see the sides of the canvas, because I like to frame works because it protects them. So even like large canvases, I work with an incredible framer here in New York, named Corinne. She runs City Frames. If anyone needs a recommendation, they're incredible. And she puts a float on the work, because I believe that the side of the works, they're a part of the work,
Mm.
to press a work in and cover it up, not really what the artist intends in most cases. So I love doing like a beautiful white oak frame that has like a 1/2 inch float, so you can see, all around the work. But so, in that, I never want to bring a work into the home that needs to be like covered up because of my husband's finics.
Do you feel your guidelines or approach to collecting has shifted as you've become maybe more comfortable or more aware of different ways of engaging in art? Or are you quite aligned with Salon? Is that sort of a mirror of your vision?
Salon is definitely an extension of the work that I appreciate. My personal collection is very much jives aesthetically with Salon's, and some of the artists in Salon's collection I also own personally. And I'm super interested in female artists. Our collection is mostly women artists. but we also are really interested in like stories. So for example, the most important work, in our collection, the most historic work in our collection, personally, Mike and I bought an incredible canvas by Kikuo Saito, who is a Japanese American painter, and he emigrated from Japan in his 20s or 30s, and he spent time working in Helen Frankenthaler's studio as her studio assistant. And his studio was right here where I am, my home in Soho. He had like a studio around the corner from me, like near Green and Broom. And James Fuentes started representing Kikuo Saito's estate, and I really admire James. We have a good relationship with him. And when we saw these paintings, we saw this incredible horizontal giant blackboard looking painting, black with these white sort of indecipherable kind of numbers and figures and letters, this sort of like gibberishy, but also kind of looks like the chalkboard of a mad scientist trying to figure out string theory, like very Einsteinian. Anyway, so we totally fell in love with the work. And when we realized that the title was Broom Eater, we live close to Broom Street, and Kiko's studios here on Broom Street. So we were like, oh my God, this painting is connected to us. It's connected to this place where we're spending time. So that was like this like moment through history where we just felt like we wanted this.
You had to have that, yeah.
We had to have it. We wanted this work to live close to its origin, and like it's just so cool. So there will be moments like that where we don't necessarily ascribe to like it has to be a female artist. She has to be working conceptually. She should be on, under whatever price or age range. We kind of fall in love with something. And once we fall in love with it, like if it works and we have, the budget to acquire it, and we try to make it happen.
And hopefully they are the best decisions.
Yeah.
In the long term anyway. Maybe it doesn't feel so intellectually deciphered, but like trusting that intuition and resonance with a work of art really should be the test or the sign that it's of value to
I
you
agree.
and to a future investment.
I agree. And, personally speaking, I'm like way less concerned with art as investment.
Mm-hmm.
We buy what we love. Like we have no qualms where these works start coming into our homes. They're like members of our family. For Salon, I have a vested interest in managing other people's money. So in that sense, I'm a little bit more investment oriented, but the work that I'm buying personally, it's like, does this totally, sink its claws into me? Am I arrested by this? Do I want to live with this? Does it feel energetically aligned? Like I'm like a little bit more heart forward with the decisions I make for myself. Mm-hmm. And like I have to share more about this Kikuo Saito work because it's like so beautiful. But I'll try to describe it because we are on a podcast. You can't see it, but it is this chalkboard looking horizontal, very large painting. And you see these sort of like white scribbles. And Kikuo made this work at the time where he had just moved to New York. He was still learning the language. And so, he's walking around and he's seeing these characters, this Western alphabet that's totally different from what he had at home. And so he's sort of transmuting these characters, these symbols, and putting them onto the canvas as a way of like trying to understand them. So when I look at this painting, I see this beautiful artist trying to connect with a new culture, feeling homesick, but also feeling hopeful that one day he will be able to, engage with this language and these characters in a way that's natural. And so, this finding home in a place far away is like something. And then I also like think a lot about words, like words are so crude. And our brains think so much faster than our words can come out of our mouths. And I think about that too, like if we could connect on different levels, like through our emotions or through our actions, through these felt senses when we're with other people, sometimes words can be so hard to use. They can. And so I think about that when I look at the painting too, like this, we're stuck in this system where these amazing human spirits and souls, we have so much depth. And then we're sort of like constrained to these, stammering, the stammering language, which really resonates with me too. So there's this painting gives me more and more every day.
I don't fully understand it. What is it that, you know, I can stare at a painting and just be in awe of it? And it is because it's that non-verbal communication on a different level that you can't describe. And so I think, yeah, it's so lovely that you get to be with that. And you just said, like, you keep learning from it and it keeps giving you something, and so beautiful. And I feel like when you're talking then that, like, all these letters are flying around
Yes.
out of him and into the work.
Yes. Oh, you have an imaginative mind like I do. Yeah.
I wanted to maybe just touch on non-traditional forms of artworks like installations and sound and digital media. And do you see that as part of the Salon collection, and how would it function
Oh,
alongside
I love that.
paintings and objects?
Yes, 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 yes. Eventually, our collection will grow so vast that we will, I hope, encompass all types of art, all types of mediums, all types of art. And installation is a really interesting one. We would work to make sure that we would have somewhere to put it. You know, one of our core things is like we don't put works in storage. So that might be the one limiting factor. Like, can we have somebody install this in their home? And if this is a permanent installation, can we work up some kind of contract with a member that we're buying this for Salon, but once, you know, you're ready to move, or maybe after a 20 or 30-year period, like you agree to own this work. I'm thinking about like a James Turrell like a James Turrell installation, for example, which is something that
Oh
Salon
yeah.
members would
Wow. I
love to
was just
have.
at PS1 recently.
Oh my
It
God,
would
they're
be
like
so nice.
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I learned recently, because I actually went down this rabbit hole, like what if we bought one of these? That actually there's like a mammoth build out that has to happen. You don't just buy like the projector and the, like, you know, the software to project these uh, what's the word I'm looking for? These light-based works, or like a sky, these sky works. You're like actually building them. They're like architectural plans. You're
Mm.
building them into a home.
Mhm.
So that's obviously permanent. But in either case, they require quite a bit of construction work to fit the work into a home. And so once they're there, they're incredibly difficult to move. Um, so you know, I'm sure if we decided we wanted to buy one, we'd figure it out, and there'd be a member jumping at the opportunity to install it in their home. We just have to figure out legally how we'd make it work. But that's definitely something we would do because we're crazy.
It would maybe need to be a fake wall that can be deinstalled, and so you're actually
Yeah.
installing it on a wall that can then be moved. I think they've put a part of an old Soho house in MoMA at the moment. It's
Yeah.
possible to take pieces of architecture and,
Yeah.
you know, put it on a truck and safely
Yeah.
transport it to someone else's
100%.
home.
Yeah. Or like I'm thinking of like, this is like this is like a very crazy idea because we definitely do not have the capacity to collect a Dan Flavin installation at this moment, but one day we'll
That would be
manifest it.
lovely too.
But like thinking about those, like, you know, these Dan Flavins that some collectors have installed in their homes, like amazing. And that's an installation, but that's movable. Um, and video, that's getting easier and easier to collect. And it's so creative the way that some people are displaying video in their homes. Like I've been to some homes where people actually buy these like really cool analog TVs, and they're set up and they're almost like these cool pieces of sculpture, this vestige from the past. And then they have digital art playing on them on a loop. So like I love to see how collectors are actually displaying these works in their homes. Or there's like the, you know, the Samsung frame TV, which are actually really incredible. Some people project digital based art video works on those. Um, Team Lab is an interesting example of an incredible collective that's making really cool, like digital based installations that also usually are, in some cases, they're projected with screens and they're interactive and they have motion sensors. Like some of that work is so cool. Yeah, I hope that someday we'll just continue to buy more and more challenging works to install and house because we'll have the capacity to you know be good stewards of them.
Yeah, it's about stewardship,
Yeah.
which is another really important question that art, the Eva Hess exhibition that they had at Hauser and Wirth. I went to this talk about just preserving and taking care of the art. You know, the artists have gone, and so there is this aspect of being carers of a work in 100 years, or I don't know how that will look for you, but it's part of the value.
Yeah, I was at a dinner on Monday with a bunch of art people, and I was seated across a gallery owner, and we were talking about Salon, and he asked, "What's your conservation plan?" I said, "That's a really good question." Because yes, at some point these works do need to be conserved. And I put it on my list to say, let's figure out how we want to engage with that. And at what, at what point do we need an annual checkup with the works? Is it every 2 years, every 5 years? How do we make sure that the works are being kept in the safest places and that they're continuing to, thrive when they're in the homes of our members? Definitely something that we talk about when we're deciding where and how to place a work. Do you have small children? Do you have dogs? Do we need to frame this? Do we need to put it behind plexi? Is this going to be in light? Can the medium withstand that? If it can't, let's move it to a darker space. So we do take all those precautions. I actually am in the process of retrofitting my home because my husband and I hope to grow our family pretty soon. So we've got a lot of art in the house. Some of it is hung extremely low to the ground, and it is not safe from little hands. And some of our friends who are starting to have children, when the friends come over, we're watching out of the corner of our eye to make sure that the crayons aren't going over into the back room.
No.
So yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can protect the art. I think I've settled on shadow boxing most of our pieces that don't already have flexi over them.
Yeah, it'll be a journey.
Yeah, it'll be a journey for sure. It'll also be very expensive.
Yeah. What do you do now for like cultural nourishment and broadening your perspectives of art? Because I guess at Artsy you were just thrown into it. You didn't really need to seek it out. Do you have frameworks now to maintain that dialogue for yourself?
I love that question. It's something that I really thought intentionally about when I stepped away from Artsy because, as you say, at Artsy, my entire job every day of 10 hours a day, I'm looking at everything that's coming onto the platform, all the new shows that are coming through. I was so, 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 so plugged in. So when I left, I knew I needed to set up like a really good pipeline of information to make sure I was just as on top of the art world as I was back then. So I'm like really voracious with my art news. I read ArtNet, I read Artsy, I read the Puck newsletter. The Marion Maneker newsletter is really good from Puck. Um, I I read art news, art forum, art review. I have it all. All the newsletters come to my inbox, and I try to make time to read almost everything. So that gives me super good coverage for like what's happening. And a lot of those publications have a bit of a New York bias. So I'm getting a lot of information about New York shows. I also go to auction previews. I love to see what's happening at Christie's and Sotheby's. These are works oftentimes that are being sold. We'll never see them again. They're amazing enough to be in museums. So I love to see the auction previews. And I really love like single owner collections. Like I'm super moved when, somebody decides to sell their collection en masse, and you can really see how an individual has curated their world over time. I also, like I said at the beginning of our podcast, I live in Soho, so I'm always walking around. If I see a new show going up in the galleries in my neighborhood, I'll pop in. And I love art fairs too. There's like a funny thing that people are so snooty about art fairs. Like you ask somebody, how was the fair? People love to say, oh, it wasn't so good. Didn't see anything that I liked this time. And I think that's so silly. My response is always, well, you didn't look hard enough. Because there's always something to discover at an art fair. So I discover so many new artists at art fairs. And I'm really strategic about the way I wind through the booths. Like I see everything. I go slowly. For like big fairs, I'll go back multiple days in a row. I like to be in the opening hours because it's like a social event. It's like 3 hours of kissing cheeks. And then I go back the next day where it's a little bit quieter. I can really look. And then sometimes I'll go back a third time on the weekend with my husband to see who's still around. So art fairs are like a big mode of discovery for me too. And then I also like outside of the visual art world, I go to a lot of dance, music. I even go to the opera. I love opera. And And yeah, I just try to keep my calendar, I like to say yes. Like there's a lot of great invitations that arrive in my inbox for different walkthroughs and curator-led talks and all sorts of things. And then like, the beauty of working in the art world is you become friends with your peers and your cohort over time. So my life is very career and life are extremely blended, um, which has its challenges, but also is really gratifying. So I love to be able to like go out for a work event, but then I'm able to see my best friends there.
For anyone that is in art, it is deeply it's a passion, and I think people are drawn to art because whatever it is has captured them and they live it.
Yeah, I know the more you like discover the deeper the hole gets. Like you think that you've seen it all, and then like there's more. There's always more.
And you can't get out. I mean, and particularly in New York City, it's sort of there's no turning back. It's further down the rabbit hole. And embracing that, and that's what I love talking to you about, all of this. I didn't know anything about this kind of digital collection based platform, and I'm just so fascinated to discover what you're doing and how you're creating it and doing it on your own and just forging this path. I think it's so inspiring for me. Not that I ever want to do that myself and go down that path, but it feels very exciting to find all these different pockets of people actioning their values and their joys. And
It's so true. There's so much space for newness and innovation in the art world. And we're seeing it now with like a lot of these really young emerging galleries. I am like so excited by like O'Flaherty's is a great example. Incredible program. I want more of that.
really rigorous and well curated.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I think like, oh, I should have been born in like the 70s and 80s
I
and
mean,
like
to
been, I would have been like at Andy Warhol's factory.
live in
Yeah.
Soho in my stinky loft.
Exactly, exactly. But like when that's also happening right now, there's like a really interesting intellectual movement happening in Times Square, which had its moment, maybe is done now, but that was really cool. These new galleries that are coming up. People are a little bit like negative on the art world right now. We're recording this like the Giacometti head like failed to sell a few days ago, and everybody's all spun up about the decline of the art world. But that is like so abstracted from like what's actually happening in the art world and like artists and this like new crop of galleries and primary programs. There's like a lot of really cool stuff happening here.
Yeah, and I don't think we understand what it will evolve to, and I think that's exciting. It doesn't
Yeah,
have to be the same for hundreds of years.
yeah.
We'll finish up. I want to ask you one thing. What do you celebrate in life? You've probably talked a
I,
lot about it
s-
already.
I I celebrate life. Life is a incredible gift. I'm very spiritual. I'm a meditator. I'm like a quester. I'm like really interested in what reality and consciousness is. And my spiritual system, I grew up I grew up in Catholic school. My family was pretty agnostic, but in my later years, I've discovered a really like deep spirituality. And that leaves me with just endless curiosity about this beautiful experience that is life. And I try to remind myself every single day that we're living this beautiful gift, this total miracle. Like we are here on a speck with every single thing that we need to survive in a limitless universe. And it's beautiful to think about that. So I just think about like being grateful for this experience every single day. And I think that's also why I'm drawn to art, because art scratches at the mystery of life. What is this? Why are we here? What do we care about? Yeah.
It's well said. So you are taking members for Salon. How do
Yeah.
people inquire about that and maybe approach having that conversation with you?
Amazing. They can reach out to me, Jordan at salon.fund. You can also go to our website to see more about what's in our collection, which is www.salon.fund. You can find me on social media, DM me. I'm pretty easy to find. And we can get in touch.
Fantastic. I'll link all of those as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jordan. It's so lovely to speak with you and meet you today.
Emily, such a pleasure. I really, really appreciate the time. Thank you. And your questions were all amazing. And it was a joy to sit and reflect and really think about where we started and where we're going.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to We Are Art People. You can listen to full episodes on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. We are online at www.weareartpeople.com. Sign up to our newsletter for show updates and happenings, and please share with someone who may enjoy listening. See you next time.